Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the demo titled Tips and Tricks to Create the Perfect Devskiller Exam. My name is Todor Papic, and my colleague Will Bland will be with me on this webinar.
Hi everyone.
For anyone coming in late, we will offer a recording of the session. After all, we're trying to do the best we can to show you the capabilities of the platform so that you, on your accounts and for your companies, can create the best tests when sending them out to your candidates. Just before we start, I'd like to confirm that you can hear us loud and clear. You can use the chat to write any questions, or in this instance, confirm that you can hear us. I just want to check with Will if we're sharing the screen at the moment.
Okay, we should be sharing the screen, so hopefully everyone can see the Devskiller app.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Ferenc, for the confirmation, and everyone else. Okay, so just to start off, I'd like to cover a little bit about our approach. We'll just braze over this. Just to a little bit about Devskiller in a nutshell as to how we intend or how we advocate testing should be done. Namely, we think that developers shouldn't be tested as if they're completing schoolwork. It is why we try to encompass the whole ecosystem of a language and allow the candidates to use whatever tools that they're used to. And we call this the first day at work experience. Now, it is all about real-world problem solving. So this is why our programming tasks are functional applications developed with unit tests, build tools, relying on frameworks, libraries, and other dependencies. So that means that we test not only the book knowledge, but also go deeper and go into their applied skill set. Now, bearing this in mind, the purpose of today's demo is to show you how you can customize that whole experience and get the most out of this platform and really test in the best way possible. So as with any test, we will start with a job description, because creating a test starts from a particular position you're trying to fill. And I will hand over to my colleague, Will, and he'll show you a little bit more about how to start. Will?
Okay, thank you, Toda. So earlier today, I was looking for a job description. And if I quickly go onto it, so this is a pretty standard job description. You would most likely look at this, see the main skills, the core skills, and create the test using it. So I have removed all of the unnecessary information on this job description, and let's go through what we would like to test. So here we can see we want a developer with 5+ years experience. So someone who is quite familiar, quite experienced. They want experience with Java, Spring, Hibernate, and Maven. Also with web technologies such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Ajax, and some frameworks, ideally Angular version 2+. REST as well, and experience in SQL. And if I scroll down to the bottom, they also want to have a candidate with knowledge of DevOps. So looking at this, I can go to the system. So let's go to Devskiller, and I can begin to create a test, which I can send out to candidates. So once in the application, you click on Test, Create New Test, and you will have 3 options to create one. So you can manually select tasks from our database. So you can go through them, you can pick the relevant ones and add it to a test. And if you've uploaded your own tasks, you can also put them in as well. We have the option to use a predefined test. So these are tests created by the developers here at Devskiller. This is more of a turnkey solution, so you can start testing developers straight away. But today, as I have a job description, I will use the skills wizard. So this will allow me to select the skills I would like to test. and add that to the exam. So if I click on Open Wizard, I will see this screen here. So I have a list of the skills I would like to test. So that was JavaScript, Java with Spring and Hibernate. And whenever you click on one of these most popular skills, you will see the related skills as well. We wanted SQL. And as I can see, the HTML and CSS, our CSS is here in HTML, but if your skill wasn't there, you can search for it in the tab, click on it, and select it. Okay, so I will specifically leave out Angular 2+ and DevOps, as Todd will show you how to add this to an existing test later on. So I'm happy with this. I will click Generate Test. And I will be taken to this screen here. So as I'm looking for a fairly experienced developer, I can remove the easy tasks. So I'm just left with medium and hard tasks. And here we have the task types. So let's add code gaps and let's remove code review. An essay is also not selected as well. So with code review and essay questions, this requires manual evaluation. So one of your developers would have to go through the question or the answer that the candidate has submitted and give it a mark. So let's scroll down and we can see the questions available to us, testing the skills that we would like to test. So let's do some JavaScript questions. I will take 3 from the medium pool and 1 from the hard. Let's also do CSS. And again, I will take 3 and let's do 2 from the hard ones. Programming, so we can scroll through them. We can see the skills that they're testing by these tags. And it's really worth looking at these because you might find a task that tests a few skills at once. So let's go down. Okay, so I found this programming task. It's testing Hibernate, Java, Spring, and JPA all at once. And it's also testing for REST. So this is a pretty good programming task for us to add to the test. So I will click on that and add it. And I will also add an SQL task as well. So let's put this one in here. So when you've selected the tasks, you're happy with them, you can click on Create Your Test, and the system will bring all of these tasks together. And then you can go in to the test by clicking Edit Contents and go through it step by step. Okay, so I will pass over to Todd. He will show you how to add tasks, remove tasks, and a couple of additional features that we do have with this. Okay, so Todd.
Okay, so here we're taking a closer look at the specific tasks that we've added to this test. So in case you are creating a test for the first time for a specific role, it is quite wise to invest a little bit of time to make sure that you select the right questions and have an easier time editing afterwards. We will cover that at some point, but the basic thing here is to understand 2 types of content that make up part of this test. That is the dynamic and the static content. So dynamic content is basically all of the content that counts toward the overall score that the candidate is aiming to achieve. All of these questions will effectively fall into the category of dynamic content. Static content is basically all of the markdowns, inputs, any kind of questions that you want to pose to the candidate, but do not necessarily want to include towards the total score of the test. It is very, very important to get a good grasp of both of those types of content, mainly because at a later stage, we will show you exactly how you can use them in order to use this test to your advantage. So just a little bit at a quick glance, we know that there's a couple of things missing that we did not intentionally use the skills wizard for. So because we're effectively dividing this into a couple of sections, the JavaScript questions come first, and it would make sense to add a couple of questions with regards to the framework we're specifically trying to test for within this category. Now, so basically I will add 2 questions to this section. And instead of adding actual direct questions, I'll show you one cool little nifty tool within our platform, and that is to randomize questions. We'll tell a little bit about why and how you can use that later, but first let's just add a couple. So in this section, obviously, we'll try to add another task. We'll obviously do this with multiple choice questions. So the first thing that I will cover is the criteria-based suggestion. And if I click on it, the system will add another random task that will match this query. So now we're going to just edit the query very quickly. Basically, the system will select a task that matches the parameters that we set, and we want to test for Angular. So and make sure to select the right Angular. I mean, there are a couple of versions of this framework. So Angular JS and Angular 2+ are very different. Now we're selecting the correct one. We'll also do another question that is a little bit more specific, and we will use the task-based suggestion. So if I click on that, the system will add yet another question. And in this case, we are required to add a particular subset of tasks that the system will pull the question from. So if I click Add Task to Set, we will obviously search for the skill, again, Angular. Select Angular 2+, and we get to the pool of questions. We don't have to add all of them. We can add just a couple. So I will just randomly select the 3 questions that will be added to this subset. And if I click this off, obviously these 2 last questions will both be random, but they're selected in a different way. Now, just a small word on the random questions. Basically, they're used to not send out the exact same test, but to test the test exactly the same skills, but not with the particular questions. So it doesn't really matter if you invite candidates in bulk to this test or if you invite them individually. Every time an invitation is created, the system will randomly pick a task based either on the criteria or a particular subset that you've added. This comes in very handy if you are, for example, testing developers from the same company and you would not like them to compare questions or compare answers. These also work the best for example, multiple choice questions where there's usually a good amount of questions that cover the same particular aspect. And what you need to be careful of is that you're obviously able to randomize any kind of type of question. But if we scroll down all the way to the programming task, we will know that this one tests something very specific to us and this job description. This is REST. So randomizing programming tasks might not be always wise because the programming tasks are quite complex pieces of functional code or functional applications, and they normally test a very specific problem. So they are problem-oriented, and depending on what you're looking to hire, you might want to select a specific programming task. Now, speaking of programming tasks, we are also required to add a DevOps task. And based on the job description, we aren't really told what scripting language that task needs to be in or what exactly we're testing. So in this case, we actually can use a randomizer both for the programming task. And I'll show you how this is done. So I'll just add another section. And again, instead of using the multiple choice questions, we will scroll down to the programming task, and I will add a subset of questions. Now, we're not looking for Angular, but we're looking for basic knowledge of DevOps. So effectively, we can just select easy difficulty, move over to DevOps, and here we will select either one in Puppet or Chef as a subset to this particular question. Now the system will obviously pull one of these up whenever we send an invitation, and that effectively concludes or covers all of the skills that we are looking to test for. It is also important to note that you can edit all of the contents of the particular task, so you can add additional points or change the allocated time that is given for these tasks. Now I will cover, or actually I will let my colleague Will cover the settings of the test, which is another aspect of particular customization of an exam.
Okay, so I can see the test here, and I'm sorry, Toda, I'm not happy with the contents. So I can delete a task, and I can simply do that by clicking on the rubbish bin here, delete it, select yes, and this will be removed from the test. And also, I'm not happy with the order of the test. So I can drag and drop, and I can change the order that the questions appear in. So once I'm happy with the settings and the contents, I can go through the settings here. So this screen will pop up. Here I can see there's a time limit for the whole test. You can have a time limit for each task. We have the option for one direction flow. So this means that once the candidate starts the test, they won't be able to go back and forth between each section if you disable this. And here at the bottom, these are concerning the programming task. So we have 3 ways to answer this. So they can use the in-browser editor, they can clone a Git repository, or they can download the programming task, use their favorite IDE, and once they're happy, upload it to the platform and submit the answer this way. So one reason that you may want to disable Git and zip, or downloading a zip file, is because you're using live code pair. So this allows you to watch a candidate taking the test live. You can see their keystrokes, and if necessary, you can have a video call with them. So you can ask them why they're answering the question this way, and find out a little bit more about them and how they are solving the problem. Okay, so I will pass back to Toda, because we have a few extra features to do with the time limit and the duration of a test. So Toda.
Okay, so we've added quite a couple of different tasks. So if we look again at the contents and all of these sections, we can actually estimate the amount of time that it will be necessary to complete this. And I think at this point, it's over 2.5 hours in total, which is quite long. Now, it's not necessarily bad to make a test long, but we want to be fair to the candidates, and we want to try break this up into at least 2 sections. Now, I will show you how this is done and show you what else you can do with the timer. So normally speaking, by default, the timer cannot be removed or paused. Every test is based on a timer. But what you can do is play around with it and use it to your own advantage. So I'll show you a little bit about the timer back in the settings. So if we click back into the settings and choose not to use the automatic duration calculation, so basically the system will collect all of the tasks that are contained in the test and suggest or allocate a specific time frame. Now, if we choose or click that off, we can manually write in the amount of time that we want to give to the candidates. Effectively, what you could do is add a lot of time for the candidates, effectively making this timer completely obsolete. So for example, we can use like 10,000 minutes that we like to give to the candidates. Now, that's not really favorable because effectively they can try as many times as they want, really have ample time And real programmers usually work in some time frames. So we want to limit them somehow. So what we can do in this instance is, instead of calculating the time for the whole test, instead calculate the time for each task. Now we'll switch this over. What that will effectively do is make all of the questions appear one by one in order. The candidates will obviously not be able to go back into a question, but will have to move from one question onto the other. If they at any point leave the exam environment, the test will continue to run and skip questions. However, because the test is so long, we don't want to put so much pressure on the candidates. We want to kind of group these questions somehow and create a break. So I believe that the programming task is the hardest. It is an hour long, and I will move it all the way to the bottom. And effectively, we can group these two programming tasks together. So this will probably be about 20 minutes and 1 hour, or maybe half an hour. That depends, because we've randomly selected these tasks. You can find more about the time when you're basically selecting the tasks for the subset. But we can group these, the SQL database question together with the multiple choice questions. And what we can do is enter a new section here. And instead of adding more dynamic content, we're going to add some static content or some static elements. So in this case, we will add a markdown. Now, by allocating time to the markdown, we're going to give them a whole day of break and an extra 30 minutes just because we're nice. So we can either manually write in a message, but I think we have one prepared, or we don't. So what we can do is just write a message to the candidates that they can leave the test environment. Sorry for the spelling. You can leave the test environment and return within 24 hours. Now you can make that message a lot warmer. You can write here anything you want, but you want to be as clear as possible. So you basically want to indicate that they can have a break at this point. Now, it's important to note that they can have a break at this point, and if they choose to finish the whole test in one setting, they can just skip through this static element. But at this point, this will effectively give them a whole day's break between the first two sections of the test and the second two sections of the test. Will tell you a little bit more about the other static elements that make up part of this test. But effectively, now we've split the test into two. It is quite long, but we've given them quite a big break, and we think that's quite fair. Okay, back to you, Will.
Okay, thank you. So with every test, there will be a welcome page and an exit page. And it's possible to edit this. So let's focus on the welcome page at the start. And if I click on that, we can see there's a test introduction. So this is what the candidate will see before taking the test. So you can put a personal message here. You can explain a little bit more about the company, about the test, what's expected. It's completely up to you. And below that, we have the test summary. So this is a summary of the test, the task types, and the expected or the recommended duration on each task. We can scroll down and we can focus on the exit page now. So if I click on that, we can start editing it. And this is a great opportunity to ask the candidate for some additional information. So I will delete this end of test message. And on the side, I can select input. I can select the input type. So I want to ask them for their salary expectations. So let's put number field. This is required. Let's put a label here. So expected salary. And what is your expected monthly salary. And let's put this in euros. So when you're happy, you just click off it and this will automatically save. You can ask them whatever you would like here. So this could be the GitHub, the LinkedIn, the notice period. It's completely up to you here. And once you're happy with the welcome and exit page, the next step would be to invite a candidate or candidates to take the test. So let's scroll up. We can click on send invitations and we will see this screen here. Quickly, one extra thing to do before sending the test. So we can change the test name at the top. So let's put this as Devskiller Java test. And now we can start to send the invitations to the candidate. So once again, I click on send invites. I can choose the test from the drop-down box. And here, I can bulk invite candidates, or I can just invite one candidate at a time. We have 3 accepted formats here. Each will show you slightly different information, or when the candidate receives the test, it will be slightly different. So if I add me into this, but will bland. So I'm using the second format here. Enter, and we have this information. So it's important to put the name here. So when you click send test, this is what it will look like in the candidates, from the candidate's perspective. So here we have my name. And if I wasn't to put a name here, it would just simply say hi. With every test as well, there's an invitation validity period. So this goes from 1 to 31 days. So I will leave this at 7. We can give the candidate or candidates a tag when sending the test. So you may want to do this because at a later date, you want to filter the candidates. So we could put a tag of London. And it's also possible to send an additional message to the candidate. So this will appear in their email inbox. I will turn this off. So we have gone through the job description. We've picked the main skills that we would like to test. We've edited the contents and the settings. We've put the candidate's emails in. And all that's left to do would be to invite the candidate. And as long as they complete the test within the validity period, you will get these results back and you will be notified of it. Okay, so that's everything we wanted to show you today. We also have some frequently asked questions. So the questions that we hear most at Devskiller, and we wanted to quickly go through them. And then there will be an opportunity for you to ask us some questions as well. So one question that we get is, what is the best order for a test? So should the programming task always be last? So we recommend, tests can be quite stressful. So we recommend that the candidate should have a chance to warm up. So you should start with the lighter questions. So for example, multiple choice, code gaps, and then you can build on to the more time-consuming tasks. So this could be the database ones and the programming tasks.
Okay, another question that that comes up a lot is there a disadvantage to randomizing questions? I think I covered that when I talked a little bit about why you should be careful when using programming tasks or when using the randomizer for the programming tasks. No, there isn't necessarily a disadvantage, except that you aren't as specific as when picking exact questions. You can avoid that by adding specific subsets, so using the task-based suggestion, not the criteria-based suggestion. And you can be very careful as to what you add to the subset. Also, if you are not so, if you don't have to be that specific with programming tasks or what you actually are testing for, like we had a case here with DevOps. So we randomized basically the scripting language, hoping that they know either are familiar with both, because we were looking for some kind of basic knowledge of DevOps. So in that sense, it really depends on the job description and the type of question that you are dealing with. And I'd say that's probably the only disadvantage of randomizing questions. And I wouldn't be too keen to use it all the time, but basically whenever you think they might come in handy, as I mentioned on the webinar previously, when, for example, you're testing developers from the same house.
Okay, another one that we hear quite often is, if I use the automatic duration calculation, is that enough time for the candidate to complete the test? Yes, this is enough time. Our questions are quite generously given a time allocation. So if the developer knows what they're doing, they have the skills, this is ample time to answer this question.
Okay, and now we'll open the floor to you. You can use the chat box to ask any questions. Okay, so feel free to shoot. Okay, so someone is asking, how many programming tasks can or should I put in the test? Now, I know that when I've played with the platform once, it struggled to render about 10 programming tasks in a single test. So I assume that there is a technical limit, but effectively, when it comes to recruitment, the limit, of course, should be time. Adding multiple choice questions is quite easy, and giving them more time that way is quite simple. But for the programming tasks, normally they're quite complex, and they ask the candidates to be very focused and dedicated to finding the right problem, to finding the right solution to a problem. And in that sense, you shouldn't use too many. In this sense, in this particular test, we used two, one of them being very, very short and kind of easy, the other one being, I think, of medium difficulty. And really, it depends on, again, on the position and the seniority level of the developer. Please mind also that when you're testing seniors, normally they will not appreciate if you're testing them for hours and hours. So it really depends on the candidate experience you're trying to create. But normally you would tend to include 1 to about 2 programming tasks per test.
Okay, so someone else has also asked, what information is displayed when I leave the welcome text blank? So if you were to leave this blank, so if I go back to the candidates list, just to explain a little bit more, and into the test. Okay, so this welcome page, if you were to leave this introduction blank, I believe it's the same in the test link. This is what it will appear like. So you can't tell that there should be any information here. And if you were to enter text, it would appear under my name here. And as I said, you can personalize this and explain what the test is about, or a little bit more about the company. Okay, are there any more questions at all?
Okay, we can give you all a few minutes. If you don't have any questions, you can also tell us that you don't have any of those. We are recording the session, of course, and this will be sent to all of the attendees. So you can just take another look if you've forgotten exactly how to do a specific thing. Both Will and I remain available to you via email. I think all of you should know us by now. So feel free to reach out to us at any point if you have any questions, but do take another look at the webinar when creating your test in case you are unsure as to how to do a particular thing. You just follow the steps we took and you know, do your best to replicate that in your particular case. I think that's pretty much So thank you very much for attending once again. That's it from me, Tudor Pupic, and I'll let Will sign off.
Thank you as well.
All right, have a great evening or the rest of the day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.